นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. Tonight we've come together to practice on the occasion of Visakha Puja. Visakha, the name of the full moon, usually falls in May sometime. Puja, worship. But we're not here to worship the moon, we're here to worship the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, particularly to remember the Buddha, who he was, because it's the day we remember his birth as a bodhisattva, his enlightenment or awakening under the Bodhi tree in northern India, and then his Parinibbana. That's the formal word we use for the death of a Buddha. And I imagine for most of us it brings up some gratitude, appreciation of what it means, what the Buddha's life means for us, what it means for us to have met with the Buddhist teachings. We might call ourselves a Buddhist, because the Buddha did something totally unique. He was a human being. He wasn't a god, he was a human being. But he discovered, or you could say rediscovered, the way out of suffering, the way to Nibbana. One of the ways they describe Nibbana, they say suffering without remainder. So not just like a temporary release from stress, suffering, some pleasant state, pleasant feeling, but a complete absence of any further suffering, suffering without remainder. And in the bigger picture that means no more rebirth. Again, that's a phrase the Buddha would use. No more rebirth. Another way he said the house builder has there's no more houses to build. The rafters have all been destroyed. The frame of the house is destroyed. In modern terms, we'd say no more mortgages to pay. No more birth, no more death, no more round of rebirth, no more suffering. But even if you find it hard to accept the concept of rebirth or samsara, life and death many times over and over again, just in one life, the Buddha was able to teach us the way to completely free our mind from the causes of suffering. Greed, anger, delusion. You could say, or you could ask, where does greed, anger and delusion come from? It comes from ignorance, unawareness. When we're not aware, we fall into mental states and intentions of greed, anger and delusion. What we call akusala dhamma, akusala karma, which is always accompanied by a lack of peace of mind. So you have many moments of greed, many moments of anger, many moments of delusion. You have many moments of mental agitation. So the modern word we use is stress. It's just many moments of greed, anger, delusion affecting our mind. So Nibbana is not just temporary release from that, it's complete release from that, no more greed, anger and delusion affecting the mind of one who's achieved that. And that was totally unique in the world, no one had done that before. So a very special gift to the world. And although he paused at first before teaching, not long after his awakening, the Buddha began to teach this way out of suffering. And we say this is the greatest gift, the gift of Dhamma. Dhammadanang sabbadanang jinati. Of all the things you could give in the world, the Dhamma, the teaching on the way out of suffering is the greatest, the best. Especially if before that no one had known that way, and no one had been able to explain it, pass it on. So this was something very special for the world. And it's our good fortune that we still have these teachings today. Even though the Buddha is not with us today, but his Dhamma, his teachings, the way of practice is still available. You could even say more available than before, because now we have technology, ways and means that we can spread the Dhamma, teach the Dhamma all over the world. So indeed, the Buddha's teachings now have reached probably every corner of the world. Sometimes when we have a online teaching, Zoom or Facebook or something, you get people tuning in from Africa or Russia or South America. So literally every corner of the world. That's just this one monastery. You count up all the different Buddhist teachers and retreat centres and monasteries around the world. That's a lot of Dhamma is being spread now, very easily. If you want to hear our teacher, Lumpur Cha, you can, any time of the day. If you have a phone or computer, you can listen to Lumpur Cha in Thai, in English, or in many other languages now. You can read his books in many languages. So even though the Buddha is no longer with us, the chance to listen and practice the Dhamma is there. And in a country like Australia, which is peaceful, we have the chance to learn and practice the Dhamma every day. No one's going to stop us, except our own mind. So in the end, the biggest obstacle to practicing the Dhamma and becoming enlightened is not other people in the world around us, it's ourselves, isn't it? Because even with all these supportive conditions, no one sitting here is going hungry, no one here is struggling. We've all got a place to stay, enough to eat. we've got access to Dhamma, but still we find many excuses not to practice. So it's actually our mind that's the problem. Our mind can be our best friend, Kalyanamitta, when we use it to learn the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma, or our mind can be our worst enemy and bring us all kind of suffering and stress. And this is what the Buddha pointed out. It comes back to training this mind. If we really want to be peaceful and happy in life, it comes back to us. So we have the Buddha, his own example, how he lived and practiced. Again, he set the example. He left his comfortable surroundings to dedicate his life to training his mind, training in the Dhamma. Because the majority of us, we're still pursuing wealth and happiness in the world. That's the way our culture is nowadays. We assume that the highest happiness comes from material wealth. But the Buddha pointed out, well, there's no end to that. You can keep accumulating more and more, but if your mind still has greed, anger and delusion, then you're still going to suffer. But partly through our own anxieties, concerns, partly through our connections, family, friends, partly through our cultural conditioning, we're still pursuing what you might call worldly happiness. That's the norm for human beings. Pursuing material wealth, fame, fortune, different kinds of pleasure and happiness, good health, the normal things that human beings might aspire to. But the Dhamma is higher than that. The Dhamma is taking us beyond that. So when we come together on Vaisakha Puja, you're remembering that fact that there is what you might call a superior happiness or a higher happiness, the happiness of Nibbana. It's there, available to us. Often we associate it with the Buddha and see it as something very, very high, very far away, not so relevant to our daily life perhaps. But the whole point of the Buddhist teaching is that you're developing Nibbana, or the causes for Nibbana, this practice, just out of what you have, your body and mind, your daily life. That's actually where you practice, and how you practice is right here, right now. Bringing your mind back to the present moment, say right here tonight. Bringing up more mindfulness, reflecting maybe on your life and what's causing you stress, if you're stressed. This is already bringing you closer to Nibbana, following the Buddhist path. Just one moment of mindfulness is already a step along the pathway towards Nibbana. So everything we do that we call Dhamma practice, whether it's the practice of kindness, generosity, charity in daily life, keeping precepts, learning to meditate, practice mindfulness, listening to the Dhamma, chanting, developing insight. All of this is bringing us closer to what the Buddha was pointing to, the peaceful mind, the pure mind. It's nothing beyond any of us. Everyone starts with the same things, what the Buddha called the 5 khandhas. We all have a body, we have a mind, we think, we feel. No one's any different. It's how we use our 5 khandhas. It's the important thing. So the Buddha encouraged us to use them, use this body and mind to practice. And he set the example. He dedicated his life to the practice until he was awakened. Then he dedicated the rest of his life to teaching it. And because he understood his mind so well, he was a very good teacher. On the night of his enlightenment, this night, the full moon in May, he gained insight into the law of karma, how human beings make karma all the time, some good, some bad, and then receive the fruits of their karma right through their life and even into their next life. He developed very deep insight into that, which he could use later to teach, to explain things to people, to warn people. You know, you should be careful what kind of karma you make, because it matters. He also gained insight into how beings do pass away and then are reborn according to their karma in different realms. This is true. This is a hard one for people with the modern mindset to understand, because we're brought up to be very logical, use scientific methods to try and prove things, and rebirth is difficult to prove because we haven't died yet. But sometimes you begin just taking it as a teaching, a theory that we receive from the Buddha, that karma does continue after we die. Death is really the death of the physical body, but the mind doesn't die. Where it goes next, what happens next, well, it depends on karma. Good and bad, what kinds of things we've been doing will bring up all kinds of results in our next life. And the Buddha had deep insight into that, so he had no doubts about that. He had full clarity on that. But then, of course, he also realized that the highest happiness has got to be something that's outside the round of birth and death. Nibbana. Complete stillness of mind. When the mind goes still, stops making karma, it's the highest happiness, because we're no longer creating the causes for more stress, more birth, aging, sickness and death. And this is something that the other teachers in India hadn't fully penetrated yet. There were certainly many teachers who could meditate very well, attain jhana, pacify their mind, but they hadn't developed the insight into Nibbana, into the end of suffering yet. And the Buddha realized that, which is why in the end he went off on his own and sat under the Bodhi tree. And that's why the Buddha is so unique. He didn't have a teacher, ultimately. Along the way he had help, but in the end he had to leave his teachers and go and teach himself. We are the lucky ones. We have the Buddha and all the enlightened Sangha since the time of the Buddha to teach us, which makes life easier for us. We get the easy ride. The Buddha didn't, and the Buddha had to be very committed, brave, and push on his own. So he probably felt a bit lonely under the Bodhi tree, because he didn't have a teacher to refer to. But he had these qualities he'd been developing, the mindfulness, the wisdom, and the determination, the patience, the energy, all the good qualities we call barami. They were very well developed. And he had the compassion, because he wasn't just doing it for himself, he was doing it for everyone. So the final kind of knowledge he gained under the Bodhi tree, what we call Asava Kalyano, the knowledge of the end of the asavas. Asava is another word for kilesa, mental defilements, rooted in delusion, greed, anger, delusion. It's the knowledge of the ending of them. It's such an important thing for us to have someone who's done that. And not only the Buddha, but then also the enlightened disciples of the Buddha. Mainly monks and nuns, but also laymen, lay women who have practiced over the years and put these teachings into practice, purified their own mind from delusion. All these people who have committed to that practice and proven that it's possible give us some inspiration. It's not a waste of time. And that can help us when we have those doubts that come up. We all have the doubts. Can I practice? Is it worth it? Learning to meditate, keeping precepts, learning to train my mind in mindfulness, letting go of things. Can I really do it? Everyone has those doubts. And half the time they hold you back. Especially on a cold winter's morning, should I get up to meditate or should I stay under the bedding, warm? Or late at night, should I meditate a bit late at night or just go to bed? There's always something else we can do. It's easy to turn away from the Dhamma because there's so much distraction nowadays. That's the double-edged sword of technology, isn't it? It can bring us to the Dhamma, but it can take us away from the Dhamma too, very easily. So we have to be a little bit disciplined, careful how we live. You can ask yourself that question. If you're trying to follow the Buddha, then ask yourself, am I following the Buddha, doing things to support the practice of the Dhamma, dana, sila, bhavana, or am I following the way of going away from the Dhamma, distraction? People are often not sure about this. They say, when you practice, how can you be sure you're practicing correctly? Because daily life can seem so confusing, complex. That's why the Buddha divided our thoughts into wholesome and unwholesome, skillful, unskillful, kusala, akusala. That's where we have to learn what is wholesome and conducive to freeing ourselves from greed, anger and delusion, or what is increasing the effects of greed, anger and delusion. That's what akusala does. Akusala, unwholesome, unskillful states of mind, bring us more stress, more suffering, the more we cling on to them. So this is a question we have to keep asking ourselves, because people get lost. And they quite often think they're doing something wholesome when it's unwholesome. And then wonder why after a while they're suffering. This is why the gift of Dhamma is so helpful, especially for young people, because if they never hear any Dhamma or never have exposure to that, then they make so many mistakes. Frightening, isn't it? You look back at your own life, how many times you've done something unskillful without realizing it, said things, done things, then you have to bear the consequences. The more we can share the Dhamma and encourage each other to practice the Dhamma, we can free ourselves from that kind of suffering. They say one who's a Kalyana Mitta, a good friend, will always encourage you to develop the good, do the good, develop kusala Dhamma, wholesome Dhamma, and to avoid or not make akusala karma. The good friend will encourage you to be careful, encourage these qualities of hiri ottappa, sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing, because you know wrongdoing's going to come back on you. A good friend will be like that. They'll be like the voice of your conscience, reminding you or encouraging you not to do that thing that you want to do or say that's going to hurt you. And we can be Kalyana Mitta ourselves to our family, friends, or even if you're on your own, you can be Kalyana Mitta to yourself. And we should also associate with Kalyana Mitta. If your friend is taking you in the wrong direction, or maybe you have to be careful about that friend, then maybe they're not a true friend. The one who tells you you're stupid for meditating, wasting your time going to the monastery, wasting your time practicing dana or generosity. There'll always be someone around with doubts or criticism. Sometimes you have to be strong and ignore them. But the Buddha was the real Kalyana Mitta, showing us the way out of suffering and encouraging us to develop the right qualities. If we hadn't had a Buddha, none of us would be here now, none of us would be doing so much good that we do, I would imagine. It's not that the Buddha had a monopoly on doing good, but his wisdom was so clear, he gave us a very clear pathway from our starting point as unenlightened human beings, making mistakes, getting stressed, all the way out of that until Nibbana. He's shown us the way. So that's why, on Wesak we tend to have a lot of gratitude, because we realize, there is a way out of suffering, we have the Buddha. But then the way to respond to that maybe is to practice more, to determine, Visakha Puja, this is the time to put more effort into my meditation, dana, keep the precepts more sincerely, listen to the Dhamma, put more time into my meditation. Because we're all getting older. Another Visakha, what's the year this year? Year 2568 in the Buddhist calendar. Another year has gone by. We're not getting any younger. And as you get older, your body gets weaker. But if you're practicing the Dhamma, maybe your mind gets stronger, better. Your life is not just determined by the health of your body, although that's a big thing. It's also determined by your mind, isn't it? I remember talking to Lumpu Uttama, considered to be a very wise, enlightened monk in Thailand many years ago. He passed away now. But he once came to Wat Mapjan when I was living there. And he was saying, well, you get older. In those days he was about 75, 80 years old. He's saying you get older, your body gets weaker and weaker and weaker. But if you practice the Dhamma sincerely, your mind gets brighter and brighter, and that's not affected by old age, sickness. He said his mind, the older he gets, the weaker his body becomes, the brighter his mind is becoming. Because the qualities you develop, the good karma you develop through your practice, cannot be taken away necessarily by old age, sickness, or even death. But it does get harder the older you get. So better to hurry up and while you've still got your good health practice, because you don't know how long you got it. But the whole point of the practice is it gives you something that transcends old age, sickness and death. And how often do we hear people complaining, oh, getting old, can't do this, can't do that. Eye's no good, ear's no good, back hurts, legs hurt, can't go here, can't. The older we get, the more we complain, and the more limited we feel. But the Dhamma is not like that. The older you get, maybe the wiser you get if you practice Dhamma. Maybe you learn to meditate, make your mind peaceful. When you meditate with mindfulness, old age disappears. It's just another condition to note and let go of. If you develop any kind of samadhi, samadhi is not affected by old age. It's a state of mind that is wholesome, peaceful, bright, happy, independent of age. Wisdom is the same. You may have as you get older, you get a body that's a bit weaker or more prone to illness. If you have wisdom, you understand, oh, this is not self. So you can get ill, but you say, oh, I don't own this, this is not me, not myself. So you can still be happy. Not always easy, of course, it's a challenge. But if you have some insight, your illness, if you get ill, doesn't have to drive you down and make you depressed. It's just an affair of karma, isn't it? We get ill, perhaps, because of karma. Even death. They say one who makes a lot of good karma doesn't have to fear death. They've got their good karma as a refuge. If the mind is peaceful, you learn to train your mind not to attach to worries and all the stressful mind states. Even death doesn't have to be something that frightens you. It's just something that happens to a human body. It gets old, it gets sick and dies. But you hold on to your good karma that you've developed. This is what the Buddha was teaching us to develop our minds with merit, with good karma every day. Ideally, learn to meditate every day. Increase the power of your mindfulness. Listen to the Dhamma and reflect on the Dhamma every day. Sure, there are difficulties in life, challenges, but how often is it your mind that makes the difficulty into a problem? What you think about things is the real suffering, isn't it? And you can remedy that quite easily by being more mindful. Catch yourself when you start worrying about things, getting angry about things, wanting things and getting obsessed with those wants. That's where you're creating suffering. If we practice more awareness, more mindfulness, maybe we can free ourselves from suffering very quickly. The Buddha would compare the mind that realizes that unwholesome states of mind, akusala dhamma, are suffering, and abandons them. He compared it to the moon. Tonight the moon is very beautiful. Outside, when you go outside, you'll see bright, shining up in the sky. Even if there's clouds, sooner or later the clouds pass and the moon appears. That's like the mind that recognizes unwholesome states, greed, anger, delusion, worry, jealousy, fear. They only cause you more suffering. They should be let go of. And when you let go of them, then the mind becomes more like the moon. It brightens up, becomes happier, peaceful. Often we misunderstand, we think peace and happiness comes when all problems are gone. But on the outside, in life, you can't get rid of all problems because the world is full of problems. As long as you live in the world, there'll be a few problems around. Learning to live with other people, paying bills, health problems, society's problems, world problems. There's always something going on somewhere in your life that you could call a problem. But those are just external challenges. The important thing is not let your mind attach to them, create suffering out of them. To do that, you have to develop more awareness, don't you? More awareness. From that you get more self-control and more understanding. Sure, sometimes there are difficulties, but you don't have to think a lot of negative thoughts about them. You just face them and solve them as you go along. When we lose that, when we're not mindful, we give in to the worries, the anguish, the suffering, and then of course we're lost, at least for a while. The mind creates all of that suffering, holds on to it, and brings up the thought, I am stressed, I am suffering. But when we practice, you have to look at that, investigate that, and say, am I really suffering, or is it just my negative thought? I'm attaching to a negative thought too much. Let it go. So Vesak is like a reminder of the Buddha and his message. We're not here to suffer, we're here to learn the way out of suffering. What is the purpose of life? The purpose is to follow this way of practice and free yourself from stress and suffering. Ajahn Chah used to compare it to a screw. When you make a piece of furniture, or you have to fasten something to a wall or something, and you use screws. What do? You tighten the screw. You'd say, well, your mind is like, you're either tightening the screw, which is like making more suffering, more attachment, more suffering, or you loosen the screw, then you feel more relaxed. As you become more aware, you can see where you're tightening your suffering, as it were, like a screw, screwing down, attaching more and more, holding on, thinking over and over again about that problem and making it bigger, more painful in your mind. Or you go the way of Dhamma, and you loosen the screw. See it, it's just a thought, comes and goes, just a feeling comes and goes. Start thinking, looking at it in a different way, seeing it in a more positive light, realizing it's not really you. You don't have to attach to that suffering, you can let it go. Every time you think of the Buddha, or you think of Ajahn Chah, or any other wise teacher, it's helping you to remind you what you need to do, to let go. Loosen that screw, and loosen it a little bit more, and you'll be freeing yourself from suffering. So in a moment we'll be walking around the hall with our flowers and candles, remembering the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, as a form of meditation. It's what we do every Wesak. But now, for now, I'll leave the talk there, and we can prepare for our circumambulation around the hall.